We've seen this 50% reduction in liver cancer mortality in eastern China from the types of interventions we've been involved, seeing and documenting how economic development has changed the course of the liver cancer risk. Our challenge, one of our challenges now is knowing that the exposure patterns are changing. How do we now take or work with a population whose big cancer is now diminishing and work with them such that they don't now superimpose other exposures that raise other cancers that have been really relatively minor in a population. You heard about the breast cancer changes, you've heard about colon cancer changes, and so what comes to mind, and this is what we deal with in public health all the time, is that just because an event goes away doesn't mean that the problem has been solved. It's just because we can drink the water out of our tap doesn't mean that we should no longer ever repair the water supply, because it's always going to be clean water coming out. And so I think for me, in terms of what we're dealing with, is that we now have a responsibility to these populations that we've been working with for decades. We've seen all this positive coming on. How do we now kind of work to re-educate and integrate in order to keep these populations healthy in the future? And that's the challenge that keeps me up at night.
Thank you. Dr. Cristiani?
Yeah, I would agree. I think John mentioned in his talk a little bit like a jack-in-the-box, how you have to keep your eye on environmental exposures all the time because new ones come along. So it's a little bit like that old carnival whack-a-mole. You've beaten one down, you think you're fine, but another one pops up. So sometimes the work we do in molecular biomarkers hopefully will improve our understanding of new exposures and new health effects before people get very sick and die from it. And the world's constantly changing and exposures are constantly changing, so we have a lot of challenges ahead of us.
Thank you. Dr. Kolditz, I'd like you to tell us specifically about your research with young teenage girls and diet and their future risk for breast cancer. And I just want to tell the audience, if you go to yourdiseaserisk.wustl, Washington University in St. Louis, .edu, you will find an amazing tool that Dr. Kolditz developed to help you assess your own risk for several cancers, as well as heart disease and diabetes. So do take advantage of that. yourdiseaserisk.wustl.edu.
Thank you. So we are continuing to work to understand how higher fiber fruits and vegetables, blood markers of carotenoids in adolescents and young adult women are powerfully protecting against breast cancer, and equally, if study section will agree, we would like to study what alcohol is doing to breast cells in the early stages of carcinogenesis that we might be able to interrupt. I'll just say that 1 in 4 cancers in women in the world are breast cancer. 1/4 of breast cancers diagnosed in women under 50, and we're basically doing nothing as a society, locally or globally. And our work points to adolescence and early adult years as fundamental for this accumulation of DNA damage, and really understanding how components of diet are protecting in this time period will, I hope, give us insights and better messages for a healthy diet for generations to come.
And should young women and young men be focusing more on vegetables? You mentioned nut butters and no dairy.
Yeah. The evidence at the moment definitely points to the vegetable consumption more than the fruit consumption as the most protective against the receptor-negative breast cancer, the subset of breast cancer that we actually don't have good treatment for. And it's fair to say that the evidence from high school diet that we have shows again that the benefit from more fiber, more vegetables in the high school years even persists again through at least to age 50 for lower risk from that diet earlier in life.
Thank you. So you are what you eat. So more vegetables, fiber, and very low on the dairy and red meat, yes? Okay. Dr. Cohen, please tell us about your latest research.
So what we're really focusing on in one particular trial at MD Anderson, we teamed up with David Servan-Schreiber before he died, was to look at this from a comprehensive perspective. So you've heard about the benefits of a plant-based diet, the benefits of exercise, decreasing your environmental exposures. And an important area that we focus on is also stress. We know, and we could have a whole session just on stress and the harms of stress. And simplistically, stress speeds the aging process. And we know this from very elegant work from Nobel Prize winner Elizabeth Blackburn for her research on telomeres, which are on the strand of every single chromosome in our body that maintain the structural integrity of the chromosome. So as cells replicate, the chromosome divides, and if your telomeres get too short, you have chromosomal instability. So if you have chromosomal instability, this can lead to mutations. And your telomeres shorten as you age, and chronic stress will shorten your telomeres. Chronic stress has an impact on every biological system. And research has definitively shown that chronic stress will make the tumor microenvironment more hospitable to cancer growth. So an aspect that's critically important is helping to manage stress, both because stress can be an etiological factor, but also because stress will interfere with all of these healthful behaviors that we want people to engage in. Stress changes the types of foods that we crave. Stress will interfere with your ability to engage in physical activity, and of course it interferes with healthful relationships. Stress also disrupts sleep, and there's been now irrefutable evidence linking sleep deprivation with increased risk of obesity, sleep deprivation with changing the way that we metabolize food, and essentially sleep deprivation leading to insulin resistance, which of course is a risk factor for diabetes. So our focus is really trying to work with cancer patients clinically as well as within randomized clinical trials to take a comprehensive approach. So have appropriate support and coaches to modify their diet, engage in regular physical activity, manage their stress, manage their sleep quality, and have the appropriate social support structures in place, first and foremost, that we provide them so that they can actually engage in all these difficult changes and, as we call it, start anti-cancer living.